And what do you think of Keir Starmer and the way he's leading the UK?
It's very tempting always. We come back to the Biden-Trump left-right thing to put the blame on one specific person. I don't think he's doing a good job for the reasons that I told you. We've got the highest tax burden in peacetime history. So he's driving business through the floor. I know that you and I have never spoken about this, but I bet you could name 50 people off the top of your head who've left the UK to go to other places, who run businesses. You're nodding, right? Yeah. For people listening. Yeah. Well, why is that happening? Because the business climate here is not good. Mm-hmm. The taxes here are very high. And also the quality of life here has declined.
And generally, I think maybe the first point you said about climate, there's a pessimism.
Yes. Why is that? Why is that?
It's self-fulfilling.
Yes.
It's like a self-fulfilling pessimism where founders who are in my portfolio that I've invested in will come to me and say, hi, we've just sold 10% of the business for 20 million.
Yeah.
And then the next sentence will be their escape plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't used to happen even 10 years ago.
And that's because of government policy. That's the only way that this happens, right? Because if the government, A, keeps taxing you up to your eyeballs, and B, keeps telling you that you are evil, which is what it does, right? If you're rich in Britain, you are evil. That's the algorithm we have. And we treat successful people, we immediately assume that they're privileged people. My pet theory is that this goes back to the landed gentry. The idea that in this country, if you were rich, there was a time when that was almost certainly because your dad was rich, or at least people thought that. And so this sense that if someone is successful economically, financially, it's probably because they've benefited from some sort of ill-gotten privilege. It permeates everything. In America, people don't feel that way. They go, you've been successful because you've worked really hard and you've had a great idea. I'd love to learn from you. I'd love to be more like you. In Britain, we go, you've been successful. We got to tax you. So if the government keeps taxing you and then telling you you're a bad person while you pay the overwhelming share of the taxes in the country, it's not a great place to be. If I come home tonight and my wife says, yeah, you earn all the money, but you're a dick and I don't like you and blah, 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 blah. After a while, you sort of go, well, if this isn't working, I'll go somewhere where I'm wanted. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's happening to a lot of the most driven, the most talented, the most successful, the most creative people. And so we're driving out the business, we're driving out the entrepreneurs. Then on the industrial side of it, we talked about it before, net zero basically means that any energy intensive business is completely unviable in Britain. And I'm sure you've seen this with AI and lots of other things. You go to where you can do your business. Then on top of that, you add regulation, particularly in Europe, which restrict your ability to do things again. So there's this, and it doesn't have to be like that. It wasn't like that in the 90s in this country, right? There was a positive go-getter business climate. And you can do that again. You just have to have a leader who is willing to do that. And Starmer is the opposite of that. And part of the reason is that they simply can't do anything about the fact that we are spending huge amounts of money keeping lots and lots of people trapped in welfare in many ways against their interest, and actually in some ways I would argue even against their will, because, and I've made this point before, if you said you're a very driven person, I'm a very driven person, but when I was in my early 20s, if you'd said to me, you don't need to work, I know you're feeling a bit depressed, as I was in my early 20s. I wasn't sure where I was doing with life. You're a bit depressed. You're a bit anxious. I remember going to apply for a job and just sweating buckets because I was so anxious, right? Well, you've got anxiety. You've got depression. You can't work. We'll give you 20 grand a year and you can just, we'll write you off and you just sit at home, play on the PlayStation, smoke weed. I would have taken that. Most people would have taken that. And that's the position we have put a lot of our young people in. We just write them off, we give them benefits, and we forget about them. And that welfare bill has become, unsustainable, but it's also uncuttable. The Labour government tried to cut it. They tried to reform welfare, and their own backbenchers revolted, and they caved. And they said, no, we're not going to reform welfare, we're going to tax the rich, because the rich, don't pay enough tax. When, in the reality, I think, you maybe look this up, the top 10% of taxpayers in this country pay, I think, more than half of all the tax. Probably significantly more than half of all the tax. But look it up. I think the top 1% pay 33% of all the tax. Fact check me on this.
Okay, so the top 10% of taxpayers pay 60% of all income tax.
Yeah. And also, what's the other one? The capital gains as well. If you look up capital gains, it's basically the same. So if you put those two together, which is basically what we pay on earning, the top 10% pay 60% of it. So what happens when you chase out those people, which is what we're doing? What happens to your tax base? You get less and less tax. That means you have to tax the people who haven't left yet more and more in order to pay people who are net consumers of tax revenues.
According to HM Revenue and Customs data, in the UK, the top 1% pay 30% of all income.
I said 33, so 30, yeah. So what happens when you say that 1% are evil and they must pay more? 1% pay 30% of all the tax.
It's funny. I'm quite a torn person on this subject because I represent kind of two sides of this argument. The first side of the argument, I just have this sort of visceral memory of being sat at my desk in Moss Side with these like bailiff letters on my right, the smashed up laptop on my left, knowing that I had no way of eating that day and thinking, do you know what I need to do? There's this thing called job seekers allowance. And I was like messing with do I join it? Cause like right now I'm like scavenging for pound coins to see if I can buy some Chinese from Yeongda takeaway. And I printed off the forms. And the forms were there in front of me on the desk to apply for job seekers allowance when I was maybe 18 years old, roughly that age, 18, 19 years old. And because I got so close, I have this huge amount of empathy for people that get to that point. And then on the other side, because I'm now in a different world and I'm around entrepreneurs so much who are so frequently telling me their escape plan from the UK that I feel the need to let the normal person that's listening to this podcast that maybe doesn't have the access to entrepreneurs or the inside conversations that I have with entrepreneurs know that when people come on the show and tell you that rich people will leave, it is my experience that rich people leave. And like, because there is an ongoing argument. No, they won't leave. And the people point at different things. No, they leave. They leave. I mean, we just saw Revolut, which is one of the most successful companies emerge from the UK in recent times. It's probably going to be worth 100 billion. The founder left. Yeah. I think it's Dubai or somewhere he's gone to.
And people say, well, Britain can't compete with a zero tax environment. We don't need to compete with a zero tax environment. People want to live in Britain still. You just have to stop clobbering them over the head and calling them evil, right?
Yeah.
Now, look, I can give you a sob story as well. Like when I was at university, I had to stop university because I couldn't pay for it. I slept on the street, in a park, blah, 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 blah. Empathy for days for people who are in that position. And there are lots of people, by the way, and this is important to say, Stephen, who are not in your position. They're not super talented. They're not predisposed to success. They're not as hardworking and motivated as you for whatever reason. Many people are disabled. Many people have all sorts of other issues. And of course, we've got to help them. But what we have done is trapped now hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who could be working and have meaning and purpose in their life on welfare. And we're not helping them get off it because it's much easier to give them a payout and forget about them. That's what's happening. And so, I've had these views since before I was in any way successful. I just looked at what works. And when we talk about rich people leaving, the thing is, I don't care about rich people leaving. People who have a lot of money leaving is not really an issue for me. What's an issue for me is people who are going to create wealth leaving.
So on that point, the founder of Revolut leaving the UK, Nick Strinsky, I think his name is, estimates say, credible reports say, that because he's leaving, there's going to be a £3 billion potential loss of capital gains tax that he would have paid had he not absconded to the UAE. Yeah. Now, to put this into more stark terms, what that means, I then did some research and I was looking at how many people it would take to pay that £3 billion, how many average taxpayers it would take to pay that £3 billion that we lose by him leaving. And it says roughly 450,000 average UK taxpayers, because the average UK taxpayer pays about £7,000 to £7,500 a year. So very simple math, 3 billion divided by 7,000 equals 430,000 people. So in plain English, that billionaire's potential tax bill is equal to the entire income tax of a mid-sized UK city for 1 year because that person decided to leave.
Congratulations, you tax the rich. Congratulations. Now, 500,000 people have to pay more tax. Well done. That's what we're doing. And because it's become a moral argument, because the rich are evil in our mentality, people don't hear this point at all. It just totally goes over their head. They go, but the rich are evil. They must pay more tax. And you go, even if I agreed with you, it still doesn't work in practice. So if something is not working in practice, why would you keep doing it?
I think as well, one of your other points was around what the UK has to offer them. And I think if the UK was really growth focused and, the energy point you made, energy was cheaper here, then that equation that these founders are making, whether to stay or to leave, would tilt a little bit further in our direction. So it's so difficult.
And no disrespect to Dubai, but most people don't want to have to live in Dubai.
I think the UK is a lovely, honestly.
That's what I mean, right now. And I say this there's lots of great appealing things about Dubai, but if you dealt with crime in the UK and you had a growth focused mindset, you had a tax climate that encouraged people to start businesses and employ people, we wouldn't be losing these people. And we shouldn't be losing these people. They are the people who will create the wealth of the future, and they should be doing it here. They should be founding and keeping their businesses here. And if you did that, then you start to turn the whole thing we've been talking about around. Because ultimately everything is about economics in this sense. The military is about economics. It's about, do you have the resources to have a strong military? We don't. So we don't.
So which leader do we need?
Again, I don't like getting into the personality side of things, but what you need is someone who understands how the economy works.
Why don't you like getting into the personality side of things?
Because what happens if I give you a name,
yeah,
then immediately people say, oh, he's one of them.
Oh, okay.
Right? I am not one of them, of any them. I'm just telling you what the policies are that I think would work for our country. If Keir Starmer tomorrow came on your show and said, Stephen, I'm here to announce a great British transformation. We're going to cut business taxes. We're going to get rid of net zero. We're going to make sure that we have the cheapest energy in the world for our businesses to grow and thrive. We're going to have a strong, capable military. And by the way, I've just hired 50,000 new police officers to deal with all the ridiculous amounts of street crime we've got in London. Sign me up. I'm all Keir Starmer, ride or die. Right? But that's probably not going to happen. That's probably not going to happen with any of the other leaders that we have. So I'm here telling you what I think the right policies are. And if there's a leader who advocates for those policies, that's the sort of leader that I will support.
Only 18% of Britons view Keir Starmer positively.
Yeah.
With around 65 to 72% holding an unfavourable opinion.
You're desperate for me to slag off Keir Starmer. I'm happy to do it.
No, I'm actually not. I'm actually not. Do you know what? My opinion of Keir Starmer? Probably a really nice person. Probably a really nice person.
Yeah. I don't really care how nice he is, and that's my attitude to all politicians.
Yeah.
I care about whether they're going to do things that are good for our country. From what I know, he strikes me as a very well-intentioned, probably fairly competent person. Mm-hmm. But what he's doing is completely wrong. The only reason I don't like to go in on him is I think he's useless. I do. I also don't think it's fair to lay the blame for everything that's happening at his feet. The Conservatives were useless before that. The Lib Dems and the Conservatives were useless before that. The Labour Party under Blair were actually not useless. They were really, really good at doing terrible things to the country. They were very competent at doing that. So what we have had for now 1 to 3 decades is terrible leadership that's taken us in completely the wrong direction.
I have to cite the statistics around his favourability or popularity because it puts everything you're saying in context, which is these ideas aren't popular.
No.
Polling has shown that Starmer's approval among the British public is the weakest of any recent UK Prime Minister, with dissatisfaction levels on some trackers showing him to be below most predecessors, even in the Labour government. So that's the weird part, because it doesn't seem to be working to drive favourability in any way either.
No. But this is why I'm saying focusing on him individually isn't helpful, actually. And this is not to argue with you unnecessarily. If you put Kemi Badenoch in his place, she'd have the same favourability ratings.
Really? Even though she has different ideas?
Does she?
I don't know. You tell me.
She has some different ideas. I mean, the Conservative Party's gone a long way to changing their policy on things like net zero, right? But while they were in power, they were doing all the same stuff. They were arresting people for tweets. They were driving the economy into the ground with this green lunacy. They were the ones that oversaw the decline of our military. So in some ways, the personality conversation is really not that important here. What's important is a gigantic paradigm shift needs to happen to our attitude to everything. And one of them is dealing with unaffordable welfare. The Tories didn't do that. Labour aren't doing it. I actually thought Labour had a better shot because at least people wouldn't say Labour are evil and they hate poor people. That's what they say when the Tories try to cut welfare. When Labour tried to cut welfare, I didn't think that would happen, but they just caved to their own backbench. And maybe they had to for political reasons. But you just have to, the shift that needs to happen in Britain is not political, it's cultural. We have to change the mindset that we have as a country around these things.
Cultural transitions are very, very, very hard. And I say that from the perspective as a business owner.
Yeah.
If you tried to get me to change, when I had a lot of people, so say, I remember in my German office back in the day, in Social Chain's German office, we had 100, 150 people, very, very different culture to the UK. So I thought naively, as a 23, 24-year-old, I could fly there and change the culture of the Berlin office.
Yeah.
How dumb was I?
This is not how we do things.
I could not change the culture of the Berlin office.
Yeah.
So I think about a country, changing the culture of a country.
Yeah. That's why I'm what I call an accelerationist.
What does that mean?
It means that I believe that the only way that these things will truly fundamentally get better is when they get really, really bad first.
So you think it's going to get really, really bad?
The only way to change the culture is for people to understand what's actually happening, so that they can't pretend the things that are happening are not happening. And that's what's happening at the moment. Most people don't yet quite know that they're poorer today than they were 20 years ago. Most people still think that we are saving the planet when we reduce Britain's carbon emissions from 2% to 1.9% of global carbon emissions, while in fact we're not even doing that. We're taking our carbon emissions and we're sending them to India and China and then shipping back the stuff they make for us in a dirtier way on big tankers, which actually consume more dirty fuel, and we're actually ending up increasing our CO2 output, not reducing it. Most people don't know that. But when they feel it in their pocket, when they feel like we're having a fiscal crisis, when they feel like they really can't afford their life anymore, that's when they're going to start to ask some of these questions. It's one of the reasons actually the narrative on net zero is shifting. Like almost nobody other than the government in this country still believes in the idea of net zero, right? Because it's moving quite quickly in that direction. And on lots of other things, it will happen when things get much more difficult for ordinary people, sadly. I don't want that to happen, but I think it's the only way things get better.
But on the subject of global warming, it's scientific fact that the climate is changing unfavorably.
What do you mean by unfavorably?
Well, if scientists talk about the poles melting and how that will have big impact on third world nations, and how that will be a net negative for the planet, because then you'll see more migration, you'll see more sort of natural disasters and those kinds of things.
Well, let's not argue about that, because neither of us is a climate scientist, but let's accept that for the sake of argument. How is outsourcing our carbon emissions to other countries while destroying our economy making that better?
It's not.
It's not, right?
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is we are pretending to be saving the planet when we're not saving the planet, while also destroying our economy, while also making sure that pensioners in this country die every winter because they can't afford to pay the heating bills that they need to pay to stay warm. In what is a first world country, that's what's happening. And it's happening because of government policy. So we are not saving the planet by killing pensioners. I'm not in favor of killing pensioners.
Have you ever thought about going into politics? Are you eligible for...
Eligible, yes. Have I ever thought about it? No. People offer me to go into politics regularly, but it's not my game.
Why? You when you talked about your mission,
yeah,
it seems very aligned with going into politics.
I feel I have way more influence doing what I do now.
Than being, I don't know, Prime Minister?
Well, that's extremely unlikely. Than being the MP for the whatever on C who gets one chance to ask a question of Prime Minister. No. I get to speak to way more people and to persuade more people and to articulate ideas in a much more unfiltered sense. And I think that's really important in the modern climate. What happens when you become a politician is you start having to talk the party line, and then you suddenly don't quite follow what you actually believe. Now you have to adjust, and you have to say, well, the party believes this. Well, I'm not interested in speaking for the party. I'm interested for describing things in reality as I see them. And then if there are politicians who want to take that on, that's their job, not mine. I just don't have the temperament for it either. I'm much more interested in the truth than I am in getting along with people, coalition building, caring about potholes, all of this other stuff.
In this multipolar world, this is how we got to the subject. I asked you who would benefit and is it a good thing?
Yeah.
And then I asked you, is it a good thing for Europe? And you said no.
Yeah.
Who is it a good thing for?
China.
Because they get to
do what they want, whatever that is. They're much less restrained by the US. It's good for India, for the same reasons. Is it good for Russia? We'll find out. Possibly.
Good for America?
Yes and no. I think that is more complicated. I think America will be able to get what it wants in that world, but it's probably going to find itself in a lot more confrontations internationally, and that will obviously be a drain on its resources and its energy.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.